I'm not the kind of guy who thinks every spreadsheet is a conspiracy. I'm a numbers person, a tie it out, document it, move on person. Executives love a good story, but auditors don't grade on charisma. That's why what happened with the worthless asset still makes my stomach tighten when I open my laptop. It started on a Monday at end of quarter. Our company, Larchmont Software, was a mid-market SaaS shop outside Chicago. Stable enough to function, stressed enough to lie to itself. We were close to refinancing our credit line, and suddenly everyone treated the forecast like a sacred text. I was the senior FP&A manager. Translation: I was the guy who got blamed when a number couldn't explain itself. And I had reasons to keep my head down. A mortgage, a toddler who thought my laptop was a toy, a wife who'd already lived through one reorg with me and didn't deserve another. At 8:10 a.m., my calendar filled with leadership sync, mandatory. Those meetings always meant one thing. Someone upstairs had decided to do something dramatic, and we were going to clap. When I walked into the glass conference room, the whole C-suite was there. CFO, CEO, legal, our controller Jenna, who looked like she'd already fought 3 fires before breakfast. A few VPs stood along the wall like they were waiting for a verdict. And then Mallory Vance walked in, VP of Corporate Development, early 30s, sharp suit, sharper smile. She didn't sit down. She set a single sheet of paper on the table like it was a trophy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I just bought us an asset for $100. The CEO laughed. $100? Mallory slid the paper forward. Bill of sale, notary stamp, real signatures. The kind of document that looks harmless until you realize it can move millions. The asset was called Brightwell IP Holdings. Jenna leaned in. "Brightwell, the startup that imploded last year?" "Correct," Mallory said. "Their patents and data rights got liquidated. No one wanted the headache. I did." The CFO, Reed Halverson, asked the obvious question. "What did we actually buy?" Mallory had the answer ready. Dormant workflow automation patents, plus contractual rights to a customer data warehouse they built for a few healthcare groups. The sale was buried in a county liquidation docket. No press, no bidders. Legal cleared the chain. We integrate it, we can sell an expanded tier. "This year?" Reed's eyes lit up. "Yes," Mallory said, "and it improves our covenant story for the bank." Everyone heard the same thing. "Leverage," she turned to me. "Mark, your team owns the model. I already sent you a sensitivity sheet. Base case assumes a modest attach rate. Nothing crazy." "Nothing crazy?" That phrase is always a threat. I nodded because in that room you nod first and ask questions later. Got it. The meeting ended the way these things always end, with optimism that felt rehearsed. Reed talked about discipline. The CEO talked about momentum. Mallory let them talk like she was letting them borrow her idea for free. When I got back to my desk, the sensitivity file was waiting in my inbox, CC'd to half of leadership. The assumptions were clean, the decimals were tidy, and the revenue jump started almost immediately, like we'd found a secret switch to turn demand on. She had lines labeled strategic wins, healthcare upside, and cross-sell acceleration, but nothing tied to a deal list. No LOIs, no named accounts, just rates and multipliers. I clicked into the file properties out of habit, created 2 weeks earlier. So this wasn't a spontaneous miracle. It was a plan. I tried to replicate the math in our forecast model. It didn't tie out. To make her numbers work, you had to assume conversion rates that would have gotten a junior analyst laughed out of a forecast review. And not just optimistic, precise, as if someone had backed into the number they needed and then built a reasonable story around it. I pulled my analyst Diego into a quick huddle. He was smart, quiet, and still young enough to believe the model was a truth machine. "Run me a bridge," I told him. "Base forecast to Mallory's version. I want what's driving the delta, line by line." He frowned at his screen. "It's mostly assumptions." "Exactly," I said. "Now tell me what assumptions we can defend." He looked up. "Can we defend any of them?" That was the first honest sentence I'd heard all day. I went to Jenna. Have you seen anything hit accounting for this Brightwell thing? She didn't look up. Legal's circulating the purchase agreement. Reed wants a journal entry drafted today. For $100? Jenna finally looked at me. They're not talking about the $100. She lowered her voice. Mallory wants it booked at fair value. Reed's on board. He says it matches the refinancing narrative. Fair value isn't a vibe. It's a number you defend with a memo, a model, and a trail of support. And we weren't in a quiet annual audit. We were in an accelerated cycle because the bank wanted updated financials before year end. And our external auditors, Grant and Bishop, the Big Four type firm that never smiled, had already sent the preliminary PBC list, support for forecast assumptions, valuation memos for significant estimates, documentation for unusual transactions, evidence of management review. Brightwell would hit all of it. At 3:26 p.m., Reed emailed me. Subject, quick tie-out. Mark, incorporate Mallory's uplift into the Q4 forecast deck for tomorrow. Auditors will ask for support on the Brightwell valuation. Keep it tight. We don't want noise. In my world, tight meant don't put anything in writing that contradicts the story. So I opened a folder on our finance drive and labeled it, boringly, Brightwell Support. I saved the bill of sale, the sensitivity file, the meeting invite, the PBC list. I wrote a timestamp note of what was said in the room. If anyone ever asked what I knew and when I knew it, I wanted the answer to be simple. Then I did the only safe thing. I asked for the basis in writing. I replied, understood. Before I finalize the deck, can you or Mallory send the valuation memo and the support tying the uplift to pipeline or signed LOIs? Auditors will ask. 5 minutes later, my Teams rang. Mallory. Mark, she said, warm and easy. I saw your email. Yeah, I said. I just need the valuation support, so we're consistent. Of course, she said. Totally reasonable. A pause, small but deliberate. And you're right, she continued. Auditors will ask. Another pause. So let's make sure they get what they need, and only what they need. My throat went dry. Okay. I'll send you the file tonight, Mallory said. This is a big win for the company. Don't overcomplicate it. The call ended. I stared at my screen, listening to the office hum like nothing had changed. But something had. Because when someone tells you not to overcomplicate a number, it usually means the number can't survive daylight. And I had a feeling that whatever Mallory was about to send me wasn't going to be a valuation memo. It was going to be a script. Mallory said she'd send the valuation file tonight. That word, tonight, sounds harmless until you've worked enough quarters to know it means after you've gone home, when you're tired, and the only thing left in you is compliance. I stayed anyway, not because I was brave, because I didn't like the feeling I'd had on that call, like she'd already decided where the blame would land, and she was just being polite about it. By 7:43 p.m., most of the finance floor was dark. The cleaning crew moved quietly between desks. My phone buzzed once, my wife asking if I was coming home for bedtime. I typed, soon, quarter stuff. Then I stared at the message, hating myself for sending it because quarter stuff had become a permanent excuse in our house. At 8:12, an email arrived. Subject, Brightwell valuation support. No greeting, no context, just an attachment. Brightwell FV. Memo final v3.docx, and a second file named assumptions, bridge.xlsx. I didn't open them right away. I saved them to the folder I'd created earlier. Then I took a screenshot of the email, header, the timestamp, the recipients. It wasn't paranoia. It was control. In my job, control is the only thing that keeps you from becoming a story someone else tells. When I opened the memo, the first thing I noticed was the formatting. It looked professional. Clean headings, citations, footnotes. The kind of document that gives executives comfort because it feels like it belongs in a binder. Fair value considerations, it said. Then under approach, it referenced a third-party valuation methodology, market approach, income approach, relief from royalty assumptions. My eyes narrowed. We hadn't hired a third-party valuator, not in 2 weeks, not in 2 months, not quietly, not loudly. We would have had purchase orders, a statement of work, and at least 3 internal jokes about how much it cost. I searched the memo for the firm name, Northbridge Valuation Partners. I didn't recognize it. Maybe legal had, maybe Reed had, but my instinct said if it were real, they would have boasted about it. I flipped to the appendix. That's where the memo should have been strongest. Assumption tables, comps, discount rates, anything that smells like actual math. Instead, it was vague. The tables were there, yes, but the inputs were soft. Management estimates, comparable market benchmarks, industry-adjusted growth. It wasn't a lie you could catch in one line. It was worse. A lie designed to survive a quick skim. I opened the Excel bridge next, and that's where the irritation started turning into something sharper. The bridge showed Mallory's uplift, exactly the uplift she wanted, mapped into our forecast structure. It even used our naming conventions, but under the support tabs, there was nothing tying it to pipeline. No list of opportunities, no CRM export, no customer names, not even sanitized placeholders. Just one tab labeled Summary with a single sentence. Incremental revenue driven by product enhancement and expanded addressable market. That's not support, that's a caption. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling tiles like they had answers. If an auditor asked, "Show me the basis," what were we going to do? Hand them a Word doc with footnotes and vibes? I could already see the walkthrough. Auditor, who prepared this? Reed, management. Auditor, who reviewed it? Reed, turning slightly toward me. Mark's team. And then it would be my signature, my credibility, my career. On a story I didn't write, I pulled up our document management system and searched for Northbridge Valuation Partners. Nothing. I searched our vendor list. Nothing. Then I searched the memo itself for author. The metadata listed. Mallory Vance. Not legal, not an analyst, not some third-party firm. Mallory. My jaw tightened. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. Confrontations are satisfying for 5 minutes and expensive for 5 years. Instead, I did what I always do when something doesn't reconcile. I built a trail. I opened a fresh email, addressed it to Mallory and Reed, CC'd Jenna the controller because she lived in reality, and I kept the tone neutral because neutral is harder to punish. Thanks for sending. Quick questions before I incorporate into the deck an audit support file. Can you confirm whether Northbridge Valuation Partners was engaged? If so, please share SOWPO or contact info for audit requests. For the revenue uplift, can you share the supporting pipeline detail, CRM export, or list of signed LOIs, referenced by the assumptions? I read it 3 times before sending. No accusation, no emotion, just 2 simple questions. I clicked send, and then I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. At 9:04, my Teams lit up again. This time it wasn't Mallory, it was Reed. Can you hop on for 2 minutes? He typed. I walked to an empty conference room and joined the call. Reed's camera was off. That alone told me it wasn't going to be friendly. Mark, he said, voice low. I saw your email. Okay, I said. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I'm trying to keep it clean, I said. Auditors will ask those questions. A pause. Reed exhaled like I'd inconvenienced him personally. Look, Mallory's initiative is a strategic lever. We're not going to derail it because you want a perfect bow on the valuation. I'm not asking for perfect, I said. I'm asking for defendable. Defendable is relative, Reed said. We're not committing fraud, Mark. We're telling a forward-looking story. There it was. Story. In finance, that word is a trap. Because stories don't get restated. Numbers do. I can build the deck, I said carefully. But I need to know what you want me to say if Audit asks where the uplift comes from. Reed's tone sharpened. You say it comes from enhanced product capability and expansion into healthcare verticals. Exactly, as the memo states. And if they ask for pipeline, I pressed. Reed's silence was longer this time. Then he said, You don't volunteer extra. It wasn't guidance, it was an instruction. My throat tightened. Reed, Audit literally has a request list. They're going to ask. They ask, Reed said, and we respond with what's appropriate. What's appropriate? I repeated, keeping my voice level. Yes, Reed said, and you're not going to send any more emails that make it sound like we don't have our act together. I could feel the line he'd drawn, the difference between being a team player and being a problem. I didn't cross it, I just marked it. Understood, I said. Good, Reed replied. I need the deck by 9 a.m. And Mark, Mallory's got the CEO's trust. Don't turn yourself into the obstacle. The call ended. I sat there in the glass room for a second, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. That was the moment my role changed, not officially, not on paper, but internally. Because up until then, I'd believed the worst-case scenario was an uncomfortable meeting. Now I understood something else. They weren't asking me to review the story. They were asking me to own it. I walked back to my desk and opened the Brightwell folder again, and I added 2 new files. Questions, log.docx, email, screenshots, PDF. Then I wrote 1 sentence at the top of the log, dated and time-stamped. If this blows up, it won't be because we didn't see it coming. And that's when my phone buzzed with a new email from Mallory. 1 line. Let's align tomorrow morning before Audit sees anything. No attachment, no answers, just a request to get me alone. But that was just the beginning. I showed up early the next morning, not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted time to think before they cornered me with a room full of witnesses. Mallory had booked a quick alignment for 8:15. Her invite didn't include Reed, didn't include Jenna, didn't include legal, just me and her, in a glass office that looked like it was designed to make you feel small without ever raising a voice. She stood when I walked in, smiling like we were teammates. Mark, she said, warm, thank you for staying on top of this. I didn't sit right away. I kept my notebook in my hand like a shield. I asked 2 simple questions, I said, vendor engagement and pipeline support. Mallory gave a soft laugh. I know, and you're not wrong. You're just thinking like it's an audit of the past. It is, I said. It's also a review of where we're going, she replied. That's the difference. She turned her monitor slightly so I could see a slide deck. Brightwell branded, clean graphics, healthcare icons, growth arrows. It looked like a story that had already been rehearsed for the board. Reed and the CEO want confidence, she continued. They don't want us to look like we're scrambling over $100 purchase. It's not the $100, I said. It's the multi-million fair value and the revenue uplift tied to it. Mallory's smile didn't break, but her eyes sharpened for a second. The kind of micro-expression you only notice when you've spent years watching executives decide whether you're useful or inconvenient. Let me simplify, she said. Northbridge is a framework, a model. It's not about whether there's a purchase order on file. My stomach tightened. So, they weren't engaged. She lifted a shoulder like it didn't matter. The memo is management's position. We own it. That's not what the memo says, I replied. It reads like a third-party deliverable. Mallory walked around her desk and sat on the edge. Closer now, voice lower. Mark, you're good at your job. That's why I want you in the room when we walk Audit through this. In the room, I echoed. Yes, she said. You're the credibility piece. There it was again. Not my analysis, not my controls, not my work, my credibility. I finally sat down and opened my notebook. Okay, then help me understand what I'm supposed to point to when they ask where the uplift comes from. Mallory leaned forward. You point to the integration roadmap. The TAM expansion, the attach rate logic. You don't open the hood and start handing them loose wires. And pipeline? I asked, keeping my tone flat. She paused just long enough to make it feel deliberate. We're building it. That single sentence landed like a weight, because we're building it means it doesn't exist yet, and you can't defend a forecast with a wish. I closed my notebook. If it's not in CRM, if there aren't LOIs, then it's an assumption, and Audit will treat it as one. Mallory's smile returned, brighter. Assumptions are the whole job, Mark. She said it like she was giving me permission. Then she added gently, Look, I'm not your enemy. This is a moment. If we deliver this quarter clean, there's a director seat that opens up in Q1. Reed's already talking about reorganizing FP&A. It was bait, wrapped in reassurance. I held her gaze. Is that why my name is going on this? Mallory's face stayed composed, but the warmth cooled. Your name goes on it because you're responsible. I'm responsible for tying numbers to evidence, I said, not for creating evidence after the fact. For the first time, she looked annoyed. Be careful, she said softly. You're talking like an obstacle. I stood up. Then send me what I asked for, in writing. Vendor engagement and pipeline detail. Mallory's eyes followed me to the door. Mark, she said, and her voice was sweet again. Don't make this personal. This is business. I left her office with that sentence sticking to the back of my throat, because that's what people say right before they do something personal. I didn't march to HR. I didn't send a dramatic email. I did what I always do when something feels wrong. I verified. First stop, accounts payable. I walked over to the controller's bay and caught Jenna before she disappeared into another fire. Do we have anything for Northbridge and Vendor Master? I asked. She didn't even pretend. She pulled up the system, searched, and shook her head. No vendor, no PO, no invoice, nothing. Could legal have paid outside the system? I asked. Jenna gave me a look like I'd asked if the CFO was secretly a magician. Not without leaving a trail? And Audit would love that trail. I nodded once. That was one piece of reality. Next stop. Legal. Our in-house counsel, Marissa, had an office 2 floors up, and she looked exhausted in the way attorneys do when they're babysitting executives. Brightwell, I said, what exactly did we buy? She pulled up the purchase agreement without hesitation, because legal doesn't like surprises either. We bought patent assignments and certain IP rights, she said. Not customer data, not contracts, not a warehouse. I kept my voice calm. Is that explicitly excluded? Marissa scrolled, then tapped the screen. Yes, right here. No transfer of personally identifiable information. No customer lists. No ongoing service obligations. Standard liquidation language. My fingers went cold on the edge of her desk. So the healthcare groups, I began. Isn't in the agreement, she finished. That was part of Mallory's strategic narrative. I reviewed chain of title. I did not bless revenue projections. That was the break. Because up until that moment, I'd been telling myself there was a chance I was missing something. Some side letter, some quiet partnership, some real asset that justified the confidence. But there wasn't. There was a $100 patent assignment being dressed up as a multi-million lever. And the forecast, my forecast, was being built on top of it. I thanked Marissa and walked back downstairs in a daze. The kind that feels like your body is moving, but your mind is stuck on one sentence. Not customer data, not contracts. I got to my desk and opened the valuation memo again, this time like an investigator instead of an employee. I checked the document properties. The author line still said Mallory. The template style looked familiar in an irritating way, like a recycled suit. Then I searched the memo text for a phrase that caught my eye. Relief from royalty. It popped up in a previous version embedded in the file history. And in that earlier version, the company name wasn't ours. It was another firm entirely, one of our competitors. Someone had taken a memo shell, swapped names, polished the formatting, and sent it to me like it was support. My stomach turned, not with anger, but with something more disappointing. It wasn't just aggressive forecasting. It was fabrication. I sat there for a minute, listening to the office come alive. Printers, coffee machines, the soft chatter of people who still believed today was normal. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. My screen refreshed. The Audit PBC tracker had been updated overnight. There was a new line item. Brightwell Fair Value Memo. Prepared by Mark Harrison. Reviewed by Reed Halverson. Prepared by me. I stared at it until my eyes burned, because that wasn't a mistake you make by accident. That was a decision. They weren't just asking me to sit in the room. They were assigning me authorship. In that moment, something in me hardened, not into rage, but into clarity. That morning, I stopped being the hero. I opened a new email, addressed it to Reed, subject line neutral, as if I were asking about a printer issue, and I wrote the only sentence that mattered. Reed, I'm seeing the PBC tracker. Lists me as preparer for the Brightwell FV memo. I did not prepare this document. Please confirm in writing whether you want my name listed as preparer. And if so, on what basis? I didn't add emotion. I didn't add threats. I just put the reality in a box and slid it across the table. Then I hit send. Because if they wanted a scapegoat, they were going to have to work harder than updating a tracker. And I didn't know it yet, but within an hour they were going to prove exactly how far they were willing to go. Reed replied 8 minutes after my email, not with an answer, with a meeting invite. Brightwell Audit Walkthrough, 10 a.m. Attendees, Reed, Mallory, Jenna, me, and 2 names I didn't recognize from Grant and Bishop. In the invite notes, there was one line. Mark to walk auditors through valuation support and forecast linkage. So that was the move. If they couldn't get me to agree in writing, they'd put me in a room and let the moment do the work. Make me talk. Make me sound like the preparer. Make the lie feel official. But that was just the beginning. I didn't forward the invite around like a bomb. I handled it like a control issue. Quietly, mechanically, and with receipts. First, I walked straight to Jenna. I'm on the PBC as preparer, I said, keeping my voice low. I'm also on the agenda to present a memo I didn't write. Jenna's face tightened like someone pulled a string. She spun her monitor toward me and opened the PBC tracker. There it was again. My name, my job title. A neat little line that made me responsible for someone else's fiction. I can change it, she said. Don't, I replied. Not yet. I want the change logged, and I want it changed by the right owner. Jenna stared at me. You're thinking this is going to escalate. I'm thinking it already has, I said. She swallowed once and nodded, like she'd just accepted we weren't in a normal quarter anymore. Next, I went back upstairs to legal and caught Marissa between calls. Quick question, I said. Do we have an ethics hotline or compliance channel? Marissa's eyes flicked to my face, reading, Yes. Why? Because I'm being assigned authorship of a document I didn't prepare, I said, and the document describes assets we didn't purchase. She didn't argue. She didn't dramatize. She just became very precise. Send me the memo, the email chain, and a screenshot of the PBC entry, she said. And Mark, don't alter anything. Don't annotate files. Preserve originals. I already saved everything, I said. Good, she replied. And if anyone pressures you to clean it up, you say one sentence. I'm not the preparer. Nothing else. I walked back down with my pulse steady and my hands cold. At 9:18, Mallory pinged me on Teams. Before 10, can you stop by my office? Just to align messaging. I stared at the message until it blurred. Then I typed, Happy to discuss in the meeting with Reed, Jenna, present. No emotion, no fight, just a boundary. She didn't reply. At 9:26, I got an email from Reed. Subject, PBC tracker. One line, tracker was updated in error, will correct. Focus on the walkthrough. No confirmation in writing that he wanted my name there. No explanation, no apology, just focus. So I took the next step a lot of people don't take because it feels like crossing a line. I filed a compliance report, not a manifesto, not a dramatic accusation, a factual statement with attachments. I was listed as preparer of evaluation memo I did not prepare. Memo references third-party firm, not engaged. Purchase agreement does not include customer data. Contracts referenced in revenue, uplift narrative, request guidance and protection from retaliation. I attached the original email header, the PBC screenshot, and the legal excerpt Marissa had pointed to, showing exactly what we did and did not buy. Then I closed my laptop for 30 seconds and breathed, because once you do that, you can't pretend you're just helping with a deck anymore. At Tenenbaum, we walked into the audit conference room. Two auditors sat across from us, Calvin and Priya, both polite in a way that felt sharpened. A laptop open, a stack of printed request lists. No small talk. Reed was smooth immediately. Thanks for making time. Brightwell is a strategic purchase. We're excited about the upside. Mallory nodded along, hands folded like she was waiting for applause. Calvin glanced at his list. Before we discuss upside, we want to understand the accounting conclusion and support. Priya turned her laptop slightly. We have a memo in the PBC folder titled Brightwell Fair Value Memo. It lists preparer as Mark Harrison. Mark, can you walk us through the methodology and your support for key assumptions? It happened exactly the way I knew it would. Everyone's eyes moved to me, expecting the same thing they always expect. The employee to carry the risk so leadership can keep the story. I didn't look at Reed. I didn't look at Mallory. I looked at Priya. I can walk you through how the forecast model was impacted, I said calmly. But I didn't prepare that memo. I received it as an attachment last night. My name was added to the PBC tracker without my involvement. The room didn't explode. It just changed. Calvin's pen stopped moving. Priya blinked once, then looked down at her screen. You're stating you are not the preparer. Yes, I said, and I have the email chain showing when it was sent to me. Reed leaned in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. There's been some internal confusion with tracker roles. Mark was involved in reviewing. I did not review it either, I said evenly. I asked for vendor engagement documentation and pipeline support because I couldn't validate the basis. Silence hit like a vacuum, the kind where you can hear the building HVAC. Mallory's jaw tightened for half a second before she rearranged her expression. Priya's tone stayed polite, but colder now. Who prepared the memo? Reed started to speak, then stopped. Mallory stepped in. It's a management position paper. We collaborated. Calvin nodded slowly like he'd heard that phrase before. Okay. Then we'll need to understand the inputs. Specifically, evidence of third-party valuation engagement or internal work papers supporting discount rate, comps, and the rights acquired. He flipped a page. Also, the memo references customer data rights and healthcare group access. Can we see the contractual basis for that? Mallory opened her mouth, and for the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have a clean sentence ready. Jenna, beside me, kept her eyes on the table, but I could feel her tension. She was watching the same car crash in slow motion. Priya clicked into the PBC portal. We'll also need to preserve the current version of the memo and any prior versions. Please do not overwrite files. If you need to provide revisions, upload as a new version with a date stamp. That wasn't a request. It was a warning. Reed's phone buzzed. He checked it, then set it face down like it offended him. Calvin continued. Given the potential misclassification, we're escalating this to our engagement partner and requesting a meeting with your audit committee liaison. Standard procedure. Mallory's face went still. Reed's voice tightened. That seems premature. Priya's smile was polite and empty. It's appropriate. And then they asked the question that turned the room into chaos. Mark, Calvin said, can we speak to you and the controller for 10 minutes without management present? Reed sat back as if he'd been slapped. Mallory's eyes flicked to him, then back to me, calculating. In most companies, that request is a guillotine blade you can hear sliding into position. Reed tried to protest. Of course he did. But auditors don't ask permission. They document resistance. When he finally stood and left with Mallory, the door clicked shut and the room got quieter than it should have been. Priya leaned forward. "We're not asking you to speculate," she said. "We're asking you to tell the truth. Who wrote the memo?" I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just opened my laptop and pulled up the file properties. Author, Mallory Vance. Then I opened my sent email from the night before, the one where I asked for vendor engagement and pipeline support. No reply with evidence, just pressure. Jenna exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a day. Calvin wrote everything down, and I realized something that felt like a small, sharp relief. They thought I was trapped in that room. I wasn't. Because the moment the truth enters the record, it stops being a personal conflict. It becomes a process. When Reed and Mallory came back in, they looked like people who'd just been told a storm was coming and couldn't negotiate with the sky. Reed avoided my eyes. Mallory didn't. She looked at me with a tight smile that said, "You just ruined my quarter, maybe." But I hadn't done anything dramatic. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't leaked. I just refused to be written into a document I didn't write. By lunchtime, the CEO's assistant was booking urgent leadership meetings back to back. By mid-afternoon, legal sent a company-wide notice. Document retention hold related to Brightwell. And at 6:11 p.m., as I packed my bag to finally go home, my phone lit up with a message from Jenna. "Board wants a call tomorrow. Audit committee. No Reed." I stared at that last sentence, "no Reed," and I understood the shape of what was coming next. They took Reed off the agenda like he'd never existed. That alone told me this wasn't going to end with, "Let's all align," and a quiet edit to a spreadsheet. This was going to end with names on a record. The next morning, I joined the audit committee call from the smallest conference room on the floor. Door closed, laptop open, hands steady on the table, like I was bracing for impact. Jenna sat beside me. Marissa from legal was on speaker, and on the other side were 3 board members I'd only ever seen in glossy investor decks, plus Grant and Bishop's engagement partner. No Mallory, no Reed, just the people who show up when a story becomes a liability. The chair, Mr. Ellison, didn't waste time. "Mark," he said, "we're not asking you to evaluate strategy. We're asking you to describe facts. Start from the beginning." So I did. I explained the meeting, the $100 bill of sale, the forecast uplift, my written requests for valuation support and pipeline evidence, the memo that represented a third-party engagement that didn't exist, the PBC tracker listing me as preparer without my involvement, the moment in the walkthrough when I stated, clearly, that I did not prepare or review the memo. I didn't editorialize. I didn't call anyone a fraud. I just described what happened and pointed to the artifacts. Because in rooms like that, emotion is optional. Evidence isn't. The engagement partner asked one question that felt like a scalpel. "Did anyone instruct you not to provide auditors with requested support?" I paused, not for drama, but because accuracy matters when you're in front of a board. Our CFO told me, quote, "You don't volunteer extra," I said, and he told me not to send more emails suggesting we lacked support. Silence followed, quiet and heavy. Not disbelief, calculation. Then Marissa added calmly, "Legal also confirms the Brightwell purchase agreement does not include customer data rights or contracts, referenced in the memo and the forecast narrative." That was the point where I felt the tension shift away from me and toward the only place it could land, the people who created the narrative. Ellison spoke again. "Thank you. Please stay available. We're initiating an independent review with outside counsel. Until then, you are under protection from retaliation. If anyone pressures you, you contact legal immediately." I nodded once. Understood. The call ended. And the strangest part was what came next. Nothing. No one stormed my office. No angry texts. No, how dare you? Just a company moving into containment mode. By noon, the retention hold became stricter. IT disabled deletion permissions on several finance folders. Grant and Bishop requested direct exports from our systems instead of relying on uploaded files. Outside counsel scheduled interviews. One by one, people I'd watched smile through leadership meetings got serious and careful in the way people do when they realized their careers might be collateral. On day 2, Reed tried to speak to me. He approached my desk like it was casual, hands in pockets, voice low. "Mark," he said, "you didn't have to handle it like that." I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. "I handled it like an audit," I said. "That's what it was." His jaw flexed. "You made it sound like I ordered you to lie." "I said what you said," I replied. "If you want it to sound different, that's not on me." He stared at me for a beat, then leaned closer. "You're going to regret being difficult," he said. And that sentence, small, petty, personal, was the cleanest gift he could have given me. Because Marissa had told me one sentence, nothing else. So I looked at him and said, "Please send that in an email." Reed went still, like his body understood what his ego didn't. He walked away without another word. That afternoon, Lee Gowell called me into a room with outside counsel. 2 attorneys, both calm, both surgical. They didn't ask me to guess motives. They asked me to explain processes. Who can edit the PBC tracker? Who uploaded the memo? When did you first request support? Did you ever approve the fair value conclusion? Did anyone offer you something in exchange for alignment? When I mentioned Mallory's comment about a director SIAT and a Q1 reorg, one attorney nodded and asked, "Was that in writing?" "No," I said. "It was verbal." He didn't look disappointed. He just wrote it down. Because in investigations, verbal doesn't mean worthless. It means corroboration matters. On day 4, Grant and Bishop came back with a preliminary conclusion. The fair value memo couldn't be relied upon, and the forecast uplift built on unsupported rights and assumptions created a material risk of misstatement, especially given our pending refinance discussions. The board had a choice: fight the auditors and gamble the bank's patience, or correct fast and keep control of the narrative. They chose control. They required a revised accounting conclusion that treated Brightwell for what it actually was: a minor IP acquisition with speculative future benefit, not a multi-million asset you could use to prop up covenants. They required the forecast to be revised to remove the uplift until sales evidence existed. The numbers snapped back to reality like a rubber band, and reality was uglier than the story. The next Monday, the CEO held an all-hands that felt like a funeral, dressed as transparency. He spoke about process improvements and enhanced governance. He didn't say Reed's name, he didn't say Mallory's, but he didn't have to. People aren't stupid. They just pretend to be until pretending becomes dangerous. That same day, Reed's calendar went blank. His access badge stopped working at 2:17 p.m. Security walked him out quietly. No scene, no shouting, just a man carrying a laptop bag like it weighed more than it should. Mallory lasted 2 more days. I know because I saw her once in the hallway, walking fast, phone pressed to her ear, face tight with the kind of anger that comes from being told, "The rules apply to you now." She didn't look at me, not because she was ashamed, because she still believed I'd stolen something from her. Maybe I had. I'd stolen the easiest version of her quarter. By the end of the month, the company updated the bank with revised forecasts and a remediation plan. The refinance didn't disappear, but the bank demanded tighter covenants and added oversight. We paid for the illusion we almost sold. That was the cost and the consequence. Then quietly, something happened I didn't expect. The audit committee chair called me directly. Not a group email, not a corporate note, a call. "Mark," he said, "you did the right thing. You protected the company from a much worse outcome." I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth. "I was protecting my name," I said. "The company benefiting was a side effect." He paused, then said, Sometimes that's the same thing. 2 weeks later, HR reclassified my role. Not as a reward, not with a balloon and a speech, just a new title, a pay bump, and a direct reporting line to the controller until a new CFO was hired. The best part wasn't the money. It was the email that came with it, from legal, short, and clear. Investigation concluded. You did not prepare, review, or approve the Brightwell FV memo. Your actions were appropriate. Please retain this for your records. I printed it, not because I'm sentimental, because I've learned how quickly people rewrite history when it benefits them. That night, I got home before bedtime for the first time in what felt like months. My son was on the floor with a toy truck, making engine noises like the world was simple and safe. My wife looked up from the couch and asked, "Is it over?" I sat beside her and exhaled. "It's over," I said, "and we're okay." She didn't ask for details. She just leaned her head against my shoulder like she'd been holding her breath with me the whole time. Later, when the apartment was quiet, I opened my laptop one last time and looked at the Brightwell folder. It had started as a precaution. It ended as proof. And the lesson was simple, the kind you don't learn from business books. Revenge isn't fire. It isn't yelling. It isn't humiliating someone in a meeting. It's refusing to sign your name to a lie and letting the people who wrote it stand behind it when the room goes silent.